Leadership has always been a key principle that I've found that has really been very helpful in the success of my career, specifically technology leadership. And when I started out, I really wanted to ensure that I had very strong technical expertise, or at least have been developed that expertise so that the people I worked with, the peers, the leaders, the group of the environment would see that I was bringing a technology focus. But technology leadership on its own, there's some key principles that I've really wanted to master. And those are methodologies, how I use key methodologies. Some of the key methodologies I've used to drive leadership is the RACI, who's responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, and the PEST, political, economic, social, technology. So what does that do? It really sets a foundation for me in terms of how I look to transformational change and how I drive transformational change working with groups of different talents and different people. So if I start on the RACI, it's very important. And the RACI is also utilized in how I look at my life. I plan my life. I organize my life. And first, in any aspect, is that when we walk into a room, whether it's a virtual room, whether it's a physical room, we always want to have a clarity of who's making the decisions, how are those decisions being made, who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted and informed. Once you have that clarity of that structure, it means decisions can happen fairly quickly. It means everybody understands their role. Am I coming into this meeting? Am I coming into this forum? Am I coming to this environment knowing that I'm the one actually responsible to execute? I will be accountable if that execution doesn't happen, or I'm going to be consulted and informed to have ideas. So some of those racy roles interchange. They interchange depending on the situation, depending on the scenario, depending on the expertise. It isn't necessarily based on title, but what it really is based on your ability at that particular scenario to make decisions, to be able to drive those decisions to actions. Because once you formulate a plan, then you need to execute. And we have lots of great ideas. There could be a great vision, great strategy, but without the execution, it's not going to happen. It's not going to be done. And so some of these methodologies I found weren't formally taught. I did not learn this formally. It was through research experimentation. So the RACI has been a very key tenet and pillar in terms of how I drive transformational change. Another aspect I found, another methodology has been the PEST, PEST, political, economical, social, technological. Why is that important? Well, ideally, the political isn't necessarily based on politics in the terms of how we know it from a democratic aspect. It's really based on sometimes the P is the sensitivity. Even if in your private life, there's going to be some sensitivity in how you communicate, whether it's with your partner, it's with other friends, family, it's understanding the environment. And in a business setting, it's understanding the room, reading the room, knowing who the stakeholders are, knowing when you walk into those meetings or you're in those forums or having those conversations, there is a sometimes a hierarchical structure. Sometimes there is an undertone that you may not be aware what's happening. So political acumen in watching the room, reading the room, who is speaking. I used to use this methodology again, or this scenario, whereby I would go into a meeting, I would have an A4 piece of paper, and I would write down where people were sitting. And then I would map essentially where the conversation was happening. So if two people were back and forth conversation, I would then realize that that particular individual may not be on title. They could be in a junior title. They could be in a senior title. They could be in a mid-level title. But where was the conversation gearing to? Where was the room looking to that individual to answer the questions or to influence and guide the room? So that was a very important person or stakeholder I needed to know. I needed to go and look at what they liked socially, try to build a relationship because they were a key decision maker or a key influencer, as I stated, that could really affect the impact, the energy in the room. So I would map that through. As years went by, it started happening very organically that I did not need to write. But that was another key piece on the P of the politics. The next component is economics. And we also need to teach a lot of young people in terms of accounting and finance. And they're two separate things. Obviously, accounting is in terms of, can be seen in terms of how you do the bookkeeping, how you're organizing in terms of your spending, your budget, etc. But finance is really the way of understanding the movement of how money works, how capital is raised, how essentially money makes money, and more importantly, in business, how money essentially drives the ability to execute, the difference between capital expenditure and operational expenditure. While this isn't a lesson on accounting or finance, having financial acumen is so important. It's so important in your private life. It's also so important in your work life. And you don't have to be in a senior position in your work life to have an understanding of how money works. The next aspect is S, the social. The relationships is so important. One of the aspects growing up when I did my MBA, I did my Master of Management, or I did my Bachelor of Science. At that time, there wasn't a huge emphasis on networking. Your Rolodex, as it's called, is so important. The ability to have these relationships that you build over a course of a time, a lifetime, a short period of time, whether you're starting your career. Every time you are meeting people, it's an opportunity to build some relationship. And you never know in the long term when that relationship would be valuable. You may think, not going to this networking event, it's a waste of my time. You never know out of 10 conversations how that one conversation may make a difference in the future. So the social aspects, the ability to come into a room where people feel that the energy that you're bringing into the room is something positive. Saying positive word, being courteous, greeting, having a social connection, feeling that you're interested in the topic, researching the topic. I'll give one example. Very much years ago, I was working in the United Kingdom in a retail, very large retail organization. And the senior people would sit around the table and the junior people would sit behind. And we would be listening to the general managers or some of the senior people talking about the profit and loss, the sales, the targets, standard business things that occurred every day. And especially after the weekend to look at what sales we'd done, where was the areas that we could increase in terms of more expenditure, what was the merchandise selling. And the general manager, the senior person at the time, had asked a question, and it was a question regarding not anything specific with the business, but it related to the fact that I was always keen on reading the newspaper before I got into work. But what that demonstrated is that when I said I put up my hand, everybody looked at me and I was able to answer the question. What that formed was a relationship with that general manager that showed that I was interested, I was engaged, I'd walked into the room. Now, it was a chance because there was a hierarchy and you couldn't really speak. But I felt that this was an opportunity to build a relationship. This was an opportunity to network. This was an opportunity to show that I was interested in affairs that were happening which could be related or sometimes not related. And I happened at that time to have information where he'd ask about something on the headline of the newspaper that day because I read the newspaper every time I went to work. So in the past, the social aspects is very important on the S. Now, the T stands for technology, and it isn't specifically meaning a technology as in technical. It could be technical in your field of work. So it's very important. You may not necessarily be the subject matter expert, but it's important to invest in your craft, invest in your industry, know what's happening in your industry. When I did my MBA, the three most important courses was economics, knowing how the world works, knowing essentially how the world economy works, knowing how your local economy works, also accounting and finance. Those aspects are the fundamental pieces that I had that really helped me. So when I became the chief technology officer or I went into leadership roles or technology, I wasn't just seen as a technical person. I was seen as somebody with a business person trying to solve business problems and bringing the technology as a way to complement that. And then with all the other aspects I've mentioned in the RACI and the PEST, this gave me a rounded viewpoint where I could participate in different forums of the room. And why that is important as when you're looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is trying to look at different group of people, not just gender, but different backgrounds, etc. It's important to demonstrate as somebody who comes from a certain background that you have a rounded knowledge as well, so you can add value, especially when you are not in the majority, you're either a minority in the room, etc. So the leadership aspects, and I talk a lot about these sort of extra pieces in my room, in my book that really give a viewpoint of what leadership means. And that leadership can be moved into any forum you are. And as young people develop and as young people grow and we are mentoring and sponsoring, the real call to action that I state to people is that what is your methodology? What is the methodology that is driving your grounded principles that will allow you to take that and utilize in any forum? For me, it's the RACI, it's the PES. I also talk about the 4S+1, which is a methodology that I talk very much on my social platforms, which is the first S of stability in terms of any technology decisions that I made in my career, especially when I was in the city of Toronto, the ability to scale that technology, the ability to ensure the solution was integrated so you didn't have technology silos, technology debt, the ability to ensure that it was secure and sustainable. And these are the key pieces. So every time I'm looking for what are the methodologies that I can scale, that I can utilize in my private life, that I can build that level of collaboration, stakeholder engagement, and partnership. And these are the secrets that you can read about in my book, Bridging World, that is available on Amazon.